Meanwhile, energy regulator NERSA says it will go ahead with the 18.65% increase on the electricity tariff. This is despite President Cyril Ramaphosa's plea for Eskom to reconsider its application for the hike. This means electricity will increase by 10% for poor households and 18.49% for municipalities. Joining us now is energy expert Clyde Mallison. Clyde, thank you so much for making time for us. So this 18% power hike is going to be implemented despite the president creating an impression that he intervened and asked Eskom not to implement it, as if he's got power to do that.
Yeah, afternoon, Paul. It's kind of difficult to unpack what President Ramaphosa said at that meeting. If one takes a kindly view to what he said, he's a lot of people would agree with him. The poor people in the country and the small businesses and all of us can't actually tolerate any further price hikes. In fact, 10 million South African households can't afford the existing electricity price, never mind the increase. So it certainly spoke to the mood of the people. But it was really ill-judged because these institutions in place, there's a whole process. Every year, NERSA and Eskom get together. They have multi-year price determinations. They spend millions and millions of rands pouring over regulatory assets of Eskom and coming up with the magic tariff increase. And I'm afraid you can't just then squash it or ask for it to be removed. And you might recall that Eskom actually requested a 32% increase.
Yeah.
And so one might argue that, gee, they're only getting 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And so it was ill-judged and probably something that my guess is he would regret having said. And yet it speaks to the issue of the unaffordability of electricity.
Yeah, because as you say, he does have a point that a lot of South Africans are finding electricity to be expensive. But the Eskom CFO has responded to the court papers, right, the application by the DA to interdict this implementation. In fact, the CFO was warning that if the power utility is prevented from raising revenue through these increased tariffs, then its liquidity issues could run into a national fiscal crisis.
Yeah, one of the things that puzzles me, because I've been presenting at NERSA Eskom hearings I worked it out the other day, for 13 years now, since 2010. And, there's a couple of things here. First of all, the risk mitigation program. I won't go into all the details, but I've presented to anyone who will care to listen to me that program would cost the citizens of South Africa 8 billion rand a year more than it need have cost us if we just changed a few of the rules that were bad rules in that process. So that's 8 billion. Andre de Ruyter, whether correctly or not correctly, said there's 1 billion a month being stolen from Eskom, so that's 12 billion. You put 12 and 8 together, that's 20 billion. Well, 20 billion is akin to a 10% increase in the Eskom price. So when one looks at the Eskom price and the fact that Eskom are asking for a so-called cost-reflective price, my question would be cost reflective of what? A poorly structured emergency program that was started 3 years ago that ended up with prices that were 8 billion a year more than they needed to be. 1 billion a month stolen from your own institution. Well, goodness me, maybe they shouldn't get any increase. So it's difficult to really pin down. I've always said at those the tariff hearings, if Eskom are given less than they ask for, there will need to be a bigger bailout from the state. And if they're given what they ask for, there will be a smaller bailout from the state. And that's exactly what's happened over the last 13 years.
So if they're given what they want, there'll be a smaller bailout from the state. What then do you think will be the significance or impact of the state deciding to take over 50% of the power utilities debt when it comes to these tariff increases they ask for?
Yeah, well, look, the state already, Eskom is a company. So it becomes a bit disingenuous to say the state keep bailing it out and getting a bigger stake in Eskom. They own all of Eskom. They're the equity owners. And Eskom, quite frankly, has been a big hole over the last 13 or more years where the state has just poured money into Eskom. And we're aware of all of the fraud and corruption and stealing and everything that's happened. It's just been a great big cash cow. And, it's coming home to roost now. And its sales are dropping. When there's load shedding, Eskom sells less than it would normally sell, which means that it gets lower revenue. But it still has all its staff and everything to pay. It's still buying coal, although heaven knows why. It's presumably using less coal than normal because it's producing so much less electricity. But it has all of those overheads.
Yeah.
And so the price just keeps spiraling out of control. And we've actually reached crunch time now. I'm not sure that every time the price goes up, like it's going to go up now, there's a bigger and bigger defection of people who are defecting not because they don't want to pay, but because they actually can't pay in many cases. And so what do you do about that? You've got to have a complete rethink of the electricity supply industry in South Africa.
Yeah.
Fundamental rethink of it.
And I mean, the issue of the non-payment of electricity is already at crisis proportions, really, in the country. Thank you for making time, Clyde Mallison, energy expert.